I am 32 years old and recently faced a situation that left me seeking an impartial perspective, which is why I'm turning to this online community for the first time. My dilemma involves my ex-boyfriend, my sister, and my parents, and it's as complicated as it sounds. 5 years ago, I met Henry when I was 26. He seemed perfect, charming, funny, and supportive. We dated for 1 year, and for the most part, I believed we were equally committed to our relationship. However, looking back, there were warning signs I chose to ignore. Henry was secretive about his phone and often disappeared for hours without explanation, brushing off my concerns by attributing them to work or making me feel guilty for questioning him. The truth came out unexpectedly during a family barbecue hosted by my parents. My younger sister, Hazel, who was 23 at the time, convinced me to join the gathering after I had been absent from family events for a while. During the barbecue, I noticed Henry was missing and went to look for him. I found him in the guest room, not alone, but with Hazel. They were together, and the shock was indescribable. They scrambled to justify their actions, claiming a profound connection and calling each other soulmates, a term they used to rationalize their months of deceit. Devastated, I left the barbecue in tears, barely managing to drive home safely. When I confronted my family, their reaction only deepened my hurt. My parents dismissed the situation as young love and trivialized my heartbreak, focusing instead on Hazel and Henry's new relationship. In the years that followed, I distanced myself from Henry, Hazel, and even my parents to some extent, focusing on rebuilding my life. I concentrated on my career, cultivated new friendships, and gradually found happiness again. Then, out of the blue, I received a wedding invitation from Henry and Hazel. Initially, it felt like a cruel reminder of the past, and I had no intention of attending. However, my parents intervened. They insisted that my absence would lead to family gossip and reflect poorly on all of us. They pressured me incessantly, employing calls, texts, and even unannounced visits to persuade me to attend. Now, as the wedding approaches, I find myself torn between the desire to maintain my dignity and the pressure from my family to appear supportive to avoid scandal. This is why I am seeking advice from this community, hoping for some guidance on how to handle this uncomfortable situation. They explained that it was time to release the hold of past grievances and aim for a more mature approach. During a heart-to-heart, my mom clarified that while they weren't pushing me to forgive, they hoped I would rise above the situation. She emphasized that maintaining family ties was more significant than clinging to resentments. Her words resonated with me. Despite the strained communication with my parents, I wasn't ready to sever ties completely. I realized that moving forward meant demonstrating my recovery, not dwelling in perceived bitterness. I decided to maintain a cautious distance from my family, but refused to portray myself as defeated. So, I agreed to attend Hazel's wedding. However, the decision wasn't the closure I anticipated. Soon after, Hazel bombarded me with texts, some taunting me about her victory or how Henry always favored her. Initially, I dismissed her messages, but one particular batch grabbed my attention. In a likely inebriated state, Hazel vented about the immense pressure from Henry's parents to prove their worth to secure their inheritance. She boasted that their marriage would solidify their favored status. This revelation shed new light on their motives. It wasn't just about love. It was about financial gain. Understanding their intentions, I viewed the wedding differently. I was no longer a scorned ex. I recognized their duplicity. But instead of reacting with spite, I sought closure, not revenge. Upon arriving at the wedding, I felt tempted to leave. The setting was beautiful. Everyone seemed joyous, but it all appeared insincere to me. I found my seat and braced myself to endure the ceremony quietly. Unexpectedly, my parents approached, requesting that I give a speech, arguing it would mean a lot to Hazel. Despite the humiliating prospect, my mother's persistence and my father's stern tone quickly wore me down. I reluctantly agreed, knowing they wanted me to preserve the family's facade, despite my discomfort. As I stood at the podium, anger and hurt surged through me. Yet, as I began to speak, a sudden clarity emerged. I initiated my speech with reflections on love's unpredictable nature and the fundamental need for honesty and trust in relationships. Then, I shared my personal ordeal, detailing my past with Henry and the heartbreak from his betrayal with Hazel. I didn't just recount my pain. I emphasized how the experience, while devastating, instilled in me lessons of resilience and self-worth. I had a heartfelt conversation with Henry's parents, expressing my gratitude for their warmth and support during the time I spent with Henry. I highlighted my appreciation and hoped they understood the complete reality of the decisions Henry and Hazel had chosen to make. Throughout our talk, I maintained a calm and steady tone, allowing the facts to resonate on their own. After I concluded, the room fell into a profound silence, and I could see the visible shock on Henry's parents' faces. They looked visibly upset and left abruptly. I could tell my words had made an impact. The rest of the wedding day turned into a whirlwind. Hazel confronted me, visibly upset, accusing me of spoiling her special day. Despite Henry's attempts to calm her, Hazel's frustration only grew. My own parents were embarrassed by the spectacle, but I stood by my words, feeling a long-awaited sense of closure after speaking my truth. Later, I learned from someone we both knew that Henry's parents were considering serious consequences for him, including possibly disinheriting him due to his actions, which they viewed as dishonorable. It seemed that Hazel and Henry's seemingly perfect future was at risk, and they blamed me for their predicament. Hazel sent a barrage of messages, labeling me as selfish and spiteful. I chose not to respond, confident in my decision to reveal the truth, regardless of the fallout. It's been a week since then, and Hazel's relentless messages continue, calling me a terrible person. It's starting to wear on me, making me question my actions at my sister's wedding. The attention this situation has received online has been overwhelming, and I'm grateful for the different perspectives people have offered. I need to clarify that attending the wedding wasn't an easy choice. I went not to stir up trouble, but to seek closure and to show my family that I'm not the vindictive person they perceived me to be. Yet, I can't deny that part of me wanted to make a statement. I felt deeply humiliated and betrayed by Henry and Hazel, two people I once trusted profoundly. In hindsight, my speech may have been driven by these emotions, aiming to ensure they felt the repercussions of their actions. I harbor no regrets for speaking out. During my time of pain, no one defended me, and Henry and Hazel's actions were largely ignored by our families. Henry's parents, though kind during our relationship, never stepped in. So, I don't regret sharing my side of the story. After the wedding, the immediate fallout was significant. Henry's parents were outraged, something that took me by surprise as they had always portrayed themselves as a dignified and upstanding family. When they discovered the origins of Henry and Hazel's relationship, everyone was shocked, but Henry's mother felt particularly betrayed and furious. She was convinced that Henry had deceived her regarding when he and Hazel had become a couple. The thought of leaving their inheritance to Hazel, who seemed to lack both morals and integrity, was unimaginable for them. Henry's consistent dishonesty and the shame it brought upon the family name led to them severing all financial support for both Henry and Hazel. A few weeks later, I learned about their financial predicaments through a mutual friend who was keen on sharing the latest gossip. Cut off from his family's financial aid, Henry and Hazel found themselves struggling to maintain the extravagant lifestyle they had planned. Their wedding itself had been an extravagant affair, and they had expected the inheritance to cover these costs. Now, without any financial safety net, they were in a panic. Hazel was particularly hit hard. She had always envisioned a life of comfort and ease, and now she faced the daunting task of managing their escalating debts. Hazel's messages to me started off furious and accusatory. She blamed me for their financial woes, claiming I had sabotaged their future and turned Henry's parents against them. She called me selfish and vindictive, accusing me of ruining her happiness out of spite. But then her messages took a turn. She began demanding that I issue a public apology to Henry's parents, insisting that I had exaggerated their story in my speech. Hazel even suggested that I should plead with Henry's parents to rethink their decision to cut them off. Her demands were absurd. She expected me to degrade myself to rectify a mess they had brought upon themselves. It was almost comical. After all the betrayal and pain they had caused, Hazel's audacity to expect me to clean up their mess was bewildering. I firmly refused. I made it clear that I was not accountable for their choices or their consequences. If Henry's parents had decided to cut them off, it was a result of their own deceit and betrayal, not because of anything I had said. Their relationship had been built on lies, and now they were dealing with the consequences. It wasn't my responsibility to rescue them. I ceased responding to Hazel's further messages and blocked her. For years, I had borne the burden of their actions, but now I felt liberated from that weight. Their struggles were their own, and I had no interest in being involved. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. It's been a week since I blocked Hazel, and the sense of relief is palpable. No one else has tried to contact me about the matter, and I hope I'm not tempting fate by mentioning it. I have more important things to focus on than such petty drama. I'm determined to keep out of it, but if anything changes, I'll be sure to provide an update. Until then, goodbye. Oops, I might have spoken too soon in my last update, a classic blunder. It's been a few weeks since then, and quite a bit has transpired, prompting another update. After deciding to move on and block Hazel, just when I thought I had moved past the drama, my family dredged it up again. Barely over a week since I had ignored Hazel's persistent demands, my parents intervened, insisting we resolve our issues. They believed my actions had unnecessarily widened the rift within our family, and now it was my responsibility to mend it. They were particularly concerned about Hazel and Henry's hardships, pinning some of the blame on me. The tension escalated until I felt compelled to confront the situation head-on. We arranged to meet at our neighborhood cafe to discuss everything. During this meeting, my parents depicted me as spiteful and vindictive, accusing me of clinging to old grudges. They criticized my speech at the wedding, labeling it inappropriate and hurtful. They emphasized the need for me to act maturely and reminded me that family should always come first, implying that Hazel, despite everything, was still my sister. They weren't just upset about the impact on Hazel and Henry. They felt I had shamed our entire family. They urged me to apologize to Henry's parents, hoping it might ease the tension between Hazel and Henry. Although their stance was predictable, it was still painful to hear. They overlooked everything Hazel and Henry had done to me, suggesting I should forgive and forget, as if time could heal all wounds. My pain and betrayal went unrecognized. Instead, they focused solely on how my actions had affected Hazel, her future, her happiness, and her relationship. Feeling sidelined and invalidated once more, I knew I had to assert myself. I refused to apologize for speaking the truth at the wedding. I pointed out that Hazel and Henry's relationship had started on a foundation of betrayal, and if they were now facing consequences, that was not my fault. I highlighted the lack of accountability for Hazel's actions and the unfair expectations placed on me to always be the peacemaker. As my parents attempted to placate the situation by saying Hazel, Henry, and I were just young and these things happen, I reached my limit. Overwhelmed by frustration, I abruptly left the cafe and even turned off my phone to silence any further attempts to sway me. But despite my firm stance, a part of me felt guilty. Your supportive messages have reassured me that I wasn't in the wrong, and I'm trying hard not to let guilt manipulate my decisions. Yet, the echoes of my parents' words lingered, making me question if I was being too harsh. Despite everything, the doubt crept in, challenging the clarity I thought I had about the situation. After my impactful wedding speech, I started to ponder whether it had truly led to Henry being disinherited, or if there were deeper issues at play that I wasn't aware of. Driven by a mix of curiosity and remorse, I decided it was time to hear Henry's parents' perspective directly. To my surprise, they were quite forthcoming when I reached out. They revealed that their issues with Henry had started well before the wedding. My speech had merely crystallized their long-standing concerns. They shared that Henry had often misrepresented his professional successes and financial independence, relying heavily on their financial support instead. Their suspicions about his honesty had been building up, but they hesitated to confront him without concrete evidence. My words at the wedding had been the final straw, confirming their doubts about his integrity and manipulative behavior. Henry's parents were particularly disappointed by the way Henry and Hazel's relationship had begun, viewing it as a serious breach of trust. They emphasized that their decision to cut ties was not a sudden one spurred by my speech, but the result of years of disappointment and accumulated evidence of Henry's behavior. They even expressed gratitude towards me for my honesty at the wedding. Knowing that they understood and appreciated my perspective was immensely relieving. It helped me realize that the tension between Henry and Hazel was rooted in their choices, not my actions. This conversation was a turning point for me. It alleviated the guilt I had carried for years and helped me understand that standing up for my truth was not wrong. It had actually helped Henry's parents see things more clearly, prompting them to take necessary actions they had previously avoided. My family, however, continued to urge me to mend things with Hazel, but I've learned to distance myself from their views. I'm focusing on myself now, prioritizing my well-being and moving forward without guilt. I've even decided to minimize contact with my family for a while as I navigate this new phase of my life. I'm committed to not letting this situation weigh me down any longer. I appreciate all the support and advice from everyone here. It truly means the world to me. I'll keep you updated on any new developments. Thank you for standing by me through this journey. Learning that someone you trusted is a cheater is a tough lesson, and it's one that will stick with me forever. It's been 4 months since I last shared anything, and during 3 of those months, life was surprisingly peaceful. Hazel and my parents had stopped trying to get me involved in the drama between Hazel and Henry, accepting that I was done being the mediator. For the first time in a long while, I found peace. I wasn't plagued by guilt or anger, and I was finally able to focus on my own well-being and happiness. However, tranquility never seems to last. At the beginning of this month, I got a message from an unknown number. It didn't take me long to realize it was Hazel. She cut to the chase and told me she had annulled her marriage to Henry, saying she couldn't handle it anymore and thought I should know. I chose not to reply. I had made it clear before that I didn't want her back in my life, and I had no intention of reopening that door. Yet, Hazel wasn't finished. Over the next 5 days, she sent a flurry of messages, gradually unfolding the reasons behind her drastic decision. Hazel told me about the severe financial hardships they faced after Henry lost his financial support from his parents. Struggling to adapt to a tighter budget, Henry didn't cope well. Instead of addressing their issues, he resorted to infidelity. Not just with 1, but 5 women, including 2 of Hazel's bridesmaids. Although I never asked for these details, Hazel seemed to know I was reading her messages, perhaps due to my read receipts. She explained how she had started to notice Henry's increasingly suspicious behavior. He was often out late, making weak excuses for his whereabouts and being secretive with his phone. Initially, Hazel dismissed these signs, attributing them to stress. However, everything changed when she received a confession from one of the bridesmaids, admitting to an affair with Henry. This admission led to a cascade of revelations. When Hazel confronted Henry, he initially denied everything but eventually confessed to his betrayals with not only the forthcoming bridesmaid, but another one and 5 other women. As I read Hazel's texts, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated. Henry had revealed his true nature to Hazel, just as he had to me years ago. It seemed like karma had come full circle. Yet I also felt a fleeting pity for Hazel. I understood the profound hurt that comes from being betrayed by the one you trust most. But that pity was short-lived. Hazel had chosen her path and betrayed me first. Now, she was facing the consequences of those choices. Hazel's messages didn't stop at just sharing her ordeal. She began seeking my advice. She wanted to know how I had coped with the betrayal and how I had managed to move on. Despite everything, Hazel was looking for guidance on how to handle a heartbreak that she once thought she'd never experience. She repeatedly reached out to me, insisting that since we had both been wronged by the same person, we ought to support each other. Yet, through all her communications, she never once offered an apology for her actions. There was no recognition of the hurt she had caused me by her betrayal with Henry. Instead, she portrayed us as being in a similar situation, as if her own troubles could somehow nullify the past. I chose not to reply to any of her messages. She had already consumed more of my time and energy than she deserved. After 5 days of her incessant texting, I decided to block her once more, and this time, I felt no remorse, only relief. Relief from not having to engage with her any further and knowing that karma had caught up with her. Henry had revealed his true character to Hazel, and she had only herself to blame for overlooking the obvious warning signs. As far as I was concerned, she was experiencing the consequences of her choices. Reflecting on the events, especially how I handled the situation at the wedding and the months following, I have no regrets. Speaking the truth was not petty. It was necessary. Henry and Hazel's relationship, built on deceit and betrayal, was bound to implode. I've wasted too much time trying to please those who don't merit my compassion. Now, I am done with that. For the first time in a long while, I am prioritizing my own well-being and happiness, and it feels wonderful. I've realized that sometimes the most empowering action you can take is to simply walk away and let karma handle the rest. That's my plan now. I'm ready to move forward and leave all this behind. It's unfortunate that I've lost contact with my family through these events, but I've been thinking it's time to seek therapy. I need to address the swirl of emotions I've been ignoring. Also, I am incredibly thankful to everyone who reached out or sent private messages of support. Your kindness made navigating this tough situation a bit easier.